And welcome back to the Give Me Liberty podcast, and we're joined by our esteemed guest, Michael Farris. Welcome.
It is my pleasure to be with you again.
Well, it's an honor, and I think the last time, maybe you've been on campus a couple of times since then, but back in 2022, we had an event, a national summit for the Freedom Center. You were invited to speak, and unfortunately that day, we had a power outage, a major power failure. Our entire grid went down, shut off many of the facilities on campus, and unfortunately we had to cancel our event. And that included you, that included Allie Beth Stuckey and Seth Dillon with Babylon Bee and many, many others. And oh man, we were we were grieving that day, but it is so good to see you on campus and addressing our law school on a critical issue. And this is something I really want to talk about. It's the state of parental rights and educational freedom in our country as it is today. And the leading question, the central question is, whose children are they? When it comes to the classroom, when it comes to who has the greatest responsibility for their care and their concern, whose children are they? Who do they belong to?
This is the second time I've been asked this question on television. The first was Bill Maher asked me this question. I was on his program when he was still at the networks before he went to HBO. And what I said, he said, you think children are chattel property. They belong to their parents like a piece of property, and was making fun of the idea. And my answer was, children do belong to their parents, but in the sense of belonging to a team. They don't belong to the government's team, they belong to the family's team. And the children need a sense of belonging. Parents have the responsibility to raise their children, and with that responsibility comes the authority to make the decisions necessary along the way of being a good parent. Mm-hmm. Kids have needs for food, clothing, shelter. They need education. Mm-hmm. Parents have the responsibility to make sure that gets done. Therefore, they have the authority to make the decisions for that. And in the context of public education, they should have at least some responsibility for what goes on with their child, to the extent that if the school is having some wild sex ed class or an assembly, parents, I believe, should have the authority and the right to opt their child out of the public schools. Unfortunately, that does not exist in very many school districts in the country as a practical matter, and the courts are not likely these days to order them to do so. There's a series of bad circuit court decisions on that have all gone in the pro-government direction. I think it's time to try some of those again. There's a new Supreme Court in town, and maybe the Supreme Court would take it, because the Supreme Court of the United States has never taken one of those cases. And so it would be something worth trying. But I think the right outcome should be that parents have the right to make some decisions within the public schools. They couldn't force the schools to teach affirmatively what they want taught, but to force their child to participate in things that they didn't want to be taught, I think that violates the Constitution.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What's really at stake, and I think there's some parents right now that they have a sense of this, because there's a growing awareness, simply because you look at X, you look at social media, there's lots of information being shared. School board meetings, this is ever since really 2021. You think about the Virginia race for governor, Terry McAuliffe kind of said the quiet part out loud, which led to Glenn Youngkin, I think, winning in Northern Virginia, right? Which was really that parents should have no say what goes on in the classroom. Are we in jeopardy of not just losing education as an institution, but really losing parental rights? And I mean, religious liberty, I mean morality, I mean values, all of those things. Are we in jeopardy of losing parental rights?
Well, there are legal theorists who are arguing that, at least for Christian parents, we should lose our ability to raise our children in our faith. And if we lose that, we've lost the totality of parental rights. But Martha Albertson Finneman at Emory Law School, Catherine Ross at George Washington Law School, Kimberly Urraco at Northwestern Law School, and Elizabeth Bartlett at Harvard Law School have all argued in a variety of articles, I should say, that parents shouldn't have the ability to teach their kids a worldview that you and I would call a biblical worldview.
Right.
But they have other pejorative names for it. But that's what they're really talking about, is they don't want parents to be able to choose things that they don't think are the appropriate values for kids to be taught. And values are the core. Everything you believe about any aspect of parenting flow from those values. And if you can't teach your children the values you want to teach, then your rights are really gone. And that's what's at stake, and that's the real thing that is being argued about in law reviews. Now, keep in mind, they educate the leading judges, the leading legislators, the future Supreme Court are going to come from people who've been taught by professors like this.
Yeah.
And so it may not happen today or tomorrow, but down the road, this is what's coming. This is the trajectory of our society. And it's already bad enough as it is with school boards in many, many districts. I think the vast majority of districts in this country are teaching some form of critical race theory or other kinds of critical sex theory and other kinds of saying, we're going to change the value system of your kids. And so the fight is upon us right now, but it's going to get worse over time. Yeah,
I totally agree. And what do you see as sort of the watershed moment where, parental rights was sort of hanging in the balance? Maybe it was teetering, maybe it was more dominant at one point, but then all of a sudden, was it Obergefell? Did that change it? Was it Bostock? Was there a particular decision that changed that, or was it really at the state level?
Well, I think it was really at a cultural level where parents decided that parenting is dropping your kids off at the right place.
Yeah.
And so, I'll drop my kids off at the public school. I'll drop my kids off at Sunday school maybe. But, when the parent is not actually engaged in the spiritual or the educational arenas, either one of them, then I think the culture did more than any other aspect, and that was gradual. I would say that was basically since World War II.
Yeah.
Now, I think there has been a moment that we can pick, and it's the moment that things started to go in the good direction, and that was COVID. COVID opened a lot of parents' eyes to what was going on in their schools because they were watching them online. And the number of parents that quit public schooling and started homeschooling, the number of parents that started making noise about what was going on in the public school dramatically increased. And so I think COVID was an accidental, in human perspective, moment of a shift. And I think the shift that's going on is in the right direction because there have been people like me arguing for these kinds of things, and parents should be paying attention. I've been doing it for more than 40 years, and so felt like Elijah in the wilderness a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, almost all parents are doing that, and your example of Glenn Youngkin winning the governorship of Virginia is the proof of that. I mean, on election night, the Washington Post issued their polling, their exit polling results, and they reported that 8 out of 10 Virginians thought that parental rights in education were either very important or somewhat important. It was like 50% were very important, and 30% were somewhat important, and 10% agreed with Terry McAuliffe. And I go, race is over.
Yeah.
No, did all those people agree and vote for Glenn Youngkin? No. But that was the cutting issue. And you get 80% of the parents or the voters in the state saying parents should, be more involved in schools. That's a monumental shift in the right direction.
Yeah, it was like the first time in a long time Republicans were actually winning on education. It seemed to be a Democratic issue for a long time. I mean, going all the way back to the 70s? I mean, so...
Since 1971, Liberty University has had one mission: training champions for Christ. We've been at this for a while, and in the shadow of the Blue Ridge Mountains, we have grown to be a global force. Today, Liberty runs over 100,000 students around the globe, studying across 15 colleges and schools. And, among them, over 30,000 military students. Across 700 programs of study, we train as one, nurses, artists, business leaders of the future and today. Together, we work to give back through service trips, local community work, and over 500,000 volunteer hours per year. And we play just as hard as we study, with 20 NCAA athletic programs and 40 club sports teams. So, who are we? We are Liberty University, and we train champions for Christ.
Looking at what's at stake, and you had mentioned, sexual revolution, sex ed, just incredible hypersexualization of young children. I mean, as early as 6 years old, being exposed to adult, pornographic material. How do we, and I think parents, but even Christian parents in particular, how do we take leadership back? How do we take responsibility in this situation, not to just be passive, not to just drop kids off at, say, the right place, but to be more proactive in the education process? What do we do?
Well, if I could wave a magic wand, if Christians are allowed to have such things, and they worked, I would tell every Christian parent, go look at the Bible and then decide how you should educate your kids. Start with the Bible. And I would suggest go read Romans 1. Since they didn't think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, God turned them over to a depraved mind to do that which ought not to be done. And then there's a laundry list of sins, including disobedient to parents and God haters. You start off ignoring God, you end up disobeying parents and hating God. That's the consequence of a system that ignores God. The public education system ignores God. By Supreme Court edict, they ignore God. And more than anything else, I'd say start with your own family and make sure that you're giving your kids a Christ-centered education. There are a variety of ways of doing that. You can homeschool, there's hybrid schools, there's good Christian schools, but if at all possible, within your, then you should do that. Now, if that's not possible for some, and don't make it's not possible because I need to make 3 BMW, buy 3 BMWs.
Right.
If it's really not possible, then get involved with your kids' education. Make sure you look at their curriculum. Make sure that you know what's going on. Talk through them about what they're learning. Really get active. Read to them. Get them to read a lot of good things. I would supplement what they're learning with good material. Have them read the Chronicles of Narnia, for heaven's sakes. Things like that would be the more you can pour into their mind that is true and good, the better off it'll be.
Yeah, I love what you say about the kind of the 3 BMW thing. I'm a millennial. I'm an older millennial, but gone are the days of kind of like the 3-car garage, the 2 or 3 cars and the multiple vacations a year. I mean, that is not reality for a lot of people, and you have to be willing to make sacrifices, and that you have to determine what is most important first. And I think for Christians, I think the challenges are first and foremost our allegiances to Christ, to the Lordship of Christ, and then it's all of Christ for all of life, and certainly our children who, in the ultimate sense, they belong to God. Right. They really don't even belong to us. They're really, it's really putting Him first and recognizing, just like I think Hannah in the book of Samuel, she made a dedication before the Lord that Samuel really belonged to the Lord. Right. And then God had blessed her with even more children. I totally agree. I think there's something else that's missing, and that's this sort of catechesis that used to be, even in public education, going back to the days of Horace Mann and before John Dewey. A big part of it was that they were learning not only American civics, but they were learning some basic biblical doctrine about who God is, who Jesus is, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, Trinitarian, orthodoxy, and all of that. They were learning that in a public classroom funded by taxpayers.
In 1951, the year I was born, which means if anybody can do math, I'll be 73 in August. There was a book published called The American Citizen's Handbook. It was for public school teachers. In it, it had a variety of stories to read to kids. They're many biblical stories in it. There's stories of good virtue and moral, good history stories. There's a Bible reading section to encourage you to read the Bible to the students. There is a Bible memorization portion, encouraging public school teachers and giving them passages, suggested exact passages for the kids to memorize. The group that published the American Citizens Handbook was the National Education Association. And so if you want to know what public schools were really like in those days, look at what the NEA was telling teachers to do.
Wow.
And so that is the state of what American education used to be. And people who think it's anything remotely like that, and has been remotely like that in the last, at least since the mid-'60s, they're just not in touch with reality.
Yeah.
And so, but to show what the system was like, the kind of public schools that made America the leader of the nation in every respect, well, that's what they were teaching.
Yeah, incredible. There is a book, I don't know if you've seen this book, it's actually by James Lindsay, and it's called The Marxification of Education, and he talks about Don Paulo Ferreira, and I've actually showed many pastors this because I think it was just eye-opening. But this critical pedagogy that came around in the 1960s, right around the time of liberation theology, Gustavo Gutierrez and all of that, and James Cone, he was all about ensuring that education would be for the propagandizing of Marxism, and really about Marxist political theory, economic theory, social theory, and really about political literacy. And basically, for students in the classroom, at pupils, they would become, in many ways, the foot soldiers of a cultural revolution. I think it was Rudy Dushka that said, we need a long march through the institutions, because the movements in the 1960s, all the protest movements, they were burning the streets, but they did not have the institutions. Now it seems that collective power is all there in DC and at the NEA and the Department of Ed and many of these other places. What do we do as Christians who find ourselves in many ways, in many respects, not only in the minority, but in some ways dissidents?
Well, the first step I'm going to repeat what I said earlier. Do the right thing with your own kids.
Yes.
Step 2, we do our own long march through the institutions. Now, the thing that Christians get accused of that is this pejorative term, Christian nationalism. This nation has never been a Christian nation in the same sense that England was, where we forced you to belong to the Church of England, and if you didn't, we put the sword to your throat. We've never been that kind of Christian nation.
Yeah.
We were decidedly a Christian culture when this country was built. And our Constitution is based on scriptural principles, especially separation of powers, federalism, enumerated powers. All the limitations and checks and balances on government were out of the Christian principle that man is sinful. You can't give too much power to any one individual. That's where that all comes from. So a Christian culture produced a free country for everybody.
Yeah.
So the idea that a Christian culture would result in enslavement of everybody, well, if you do the Church of England style, I get it, why you think that. But if you look at the American style of it, you're just wrong, because we were the ones that brought freedom for everybody and believe in freedom for everybody. We're the ones that will still say, I may disagree with everything you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it.
Right.
The people that are engaging in cancel culture don't believe in that core American principle. And a country that doesn't believe in free speech for everybody is not America anymore.
Yeah.
So if they call it America, they've appropriated a name. Talk about cultural appropriation. Calling anything to do with that woke culture American is the ultimate insult and is the worst form of a cultural appropriation I've ever heard of.
So you're looking for a university that's perfect for you, a school that has anything you could possibly need.
Anything?
You want a place that has the programs you want to study, and maybe a few more, just in case you change your mind.
I think I'm going to sign up for the fashion design program.
All right. A place with state-of-the-art facilities. I mean, look at this campus.
And who doesn't love big-time sports?
And great recreational activities.
Okay, now we're on a roll. Somewhere you can hike, slide, strike, shoot, climb, eat, and most importantly, eat. You're in a place that takes you to space! Okay, maybe not, but we can teach you how to fly, or pastor a church, or run a business. And all that with a great view? Yeah, I think I know a place.
I totally agree. There's this mass revisionism. This goes back to Orwell's 1984. He who controls the present controls the past. He who controls the past controls the future. And it seems as though in the present, they almost have this hegemonic influence. There's historical amnesia. And then I even say, among our friends here at the Freedom Center, there's almost this contemporary dementia. Like if we want to know the news of the day, in many ways, there's a parallel between the American president and the American public. We got a president who, in many ways, looks and acts as though he has dementia, but we have an American public who doesn't have full access to data and information. If you Google search something right now, results are curated, and the ones that go up to the top are the ones propagating a certain kind of myth, and then other things that are more truthful are going to be buried at the bottom. I agree with you. We need a long march. I agree with you, just like Edmund Burke said, the platoons of freedom are the family. Mm-hmm. If we start there, we can build towards a future. It's a long-term, not a short-term play. What would you encourage maybe folks who might be listening, how to start small? Maybe some say, look, I don't think I can do homeschooling, but maybe they need to be challenged a little bit and encouraged to do so. Maybe some of them don't recognize how bad the situation is as of yet.
Well, on the homeschooling question, and then I'll go broader. If you think you can't homeschool, go find a family in your circle. Almost everybody these days knows at least one family that's homeschooling. And ask them if they think it's practical for you, and they'll just share their experience with you. And you'll find, I think you'll find this, most parents that are homeschooling, pretty much average parents. Yeah. And the conclusion of most people will be, hey, yeah, their kids are pretty good. I think my kids kind of turn out like that. Yeah. And then they'll look at the parents and go, yeah, they're just average parents. If they can do it successfully, so can I. So just go talk to somebody and reassess, see if you can. On the broader perspective, I actually have hope for the country in the long haul. Yeah. We're going to go through some deep water for a while. Yeah. But I think that the other side has overshot, or to use a football analogy, they've outpunted their coverage. Yes. And they've tried to take too much ground too soon, and people know that there's something fundamentally wrong with it. And I think that we need to re-embrace our history. Like just use the 1619 Project compared to the truth. The 1619 Project says America was intrinsically evil because on July 4th, 1776, women weren't provided equality, and we had slavery, among other problems. Yes. Okay. July 4th, 1776 was the day we started. Mm. If we judge America by the reality of the day we started, we have to ask ourselves, why were they starting afresh? Mm. It wasn't, you're not judging the status quo on July 4th. You should be judging, where did they want to go? And where do they want to go was in the Declaration of Independence. We are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Were our inalienable rights being protected? No. Were all men being treated equally? No. Did we have self-government? No. We had none of the promises of the Declaration of Independence in place. It was an announcement of not where we are, but where we wanted to go. And we started going in the right direction on all those things. Did we improve in all those areas? Yes. Was it too slow in equality? Yes. Did it take a lot longer to get rid of slavery than it should have been? Yes. But we did get rid of slavery. We did ban it in the 13th Amendment. We promised legal equality against the government in the 14th Amendment in 1868. We promised legal equality in the business context, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We have marched in the right direction on all those things. And so America's ideals have been proven to be the right ideals. And to throw out America because we weren't perfect on the day we were born is nonsense.
Yeah.
It's just nonsense. And it's people that want to supplant us with it's truly a Marxist theology. And it's a trick. It's the worst kind of evil trick to say we should throw it all out because it was bad on the day it was born. What kind of nonsense is that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And you read, if you go back to Frederick Douglass and others, even he observed rightly that were enshrined within that with promises that made equality and freedom possible. We didn't live up to the standards, but it was already written in the language.
Yeah, anybody listening this is one thing that you can Google, is Frederick Douglass's speech, what to the slave is the 4th of July? And he makes that comparison. Yes. It's an amazing speech. It's hard to read at times, but it must be read, and boy, does he nail it correctly.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Well, I appreciate so much you taking the time to sit down with us. I want to give you one final question. This is for students, this is parents, everybody else that's out there. Why should Christians be actively engaged in the public square? We get that question oftentimes. I think the heart comes from a right place, but sometimes the dots are not fully connected about people matter. And because people matter, that means principles matter, policies matter, politics matters. But why should we be involved in the political process?
Well, because we live in a democratic constitutional republic, we have certain rights and responsibilities. Those are twin things. With rights come responsibilities. And as citizens, we have the right to vote, the right to choose our leaders. We have the responsibility to do it. We have the responsibility to do it as pleases God. In Hosea chapter 8, verses 1 through 4, Israel was punished, and it says, because they chose princes without my approval and kings without my consent. In other words, they're choosing the wrong people.
Yeah.
And so, and in Deuteronomy 17, he says, when you pick a king, here's the attributes of how to pick a king. And you use God's attributes on how to pick a king. He should be humble before himself. He knows the word of God intensely. He doesn't turn from God's law to the right or the left. He's not out in it for money. It's a really good list of things. And if we use God's word and ask where are the candidates on the issues that I should care about because I care about a Christian worldview. You get all those things up and you add it to the book of James. For him who knows to do right and doeth it not, to him it is sin. You have a responsibility, therefore you should do right. If you don't do right, it's a sin. So when God gives you responsibility, you got to carry it out. Yeah. You got to carry it out with excellence. You got to do it as unto the Lord.
Amen. We'll leave it there. Michael Farris, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.